What I'm going to do today is that I'm not one for standing behind a podium and speaking. I like to move around and talk as I go, and you're going to have to put up with me for almost 50 minutes. So it's probably a good idea that I'm active and you've got to keep up with where I am. We love South Australia too, and we are tremendously grateful for the incredible support we've had from the South Australian government. But the thing I love about South Australia is that you've got critical mass here, and yet at the same time, we're able to work effectively and practically with the 3 different universities, with people in the private sector, and with government as well. And I just find it so productive. So every time I'm on Facebook, I post another picture of me arriving in Adelaide, and I point to the Adelaide sign, and maybe someday someone in Melbourne or Victoria might actually see it and go, how come that guy keeps on going to South Australia? So, building a sustainable Australian scientific and medical device company. That seems like a pretty big topic to cover. So I thought, how am I going to do this? How am I going to cover this topic? And then I started following some of the promotion about AusBiotech and about AusMedtech and this event. And words started popping out, Anna, that I hadn't seen before, like Stephen's going to provide a blueprint on how to have a sustainable medical business, and he's going to give the secrets away about how to build a sustainable activity. So I thought what I should do is, instead of taking 50 minutes to get to the point, I should probably just reveal it all at the very, very beginning and tell you what the magic formula is. So if you've got pen and paper and you've got your iPhones ready, you can take a picture of the next slide. If you haven't, don't worry, because I've said that these slides will be available to anybody who actually wants to have them. Okay, are you ready? Okay, here it comes. That's it. That is the magic formula for creating a sustainable business. My daughter's doing physics at Monash, and she tells me that there's some stuff in there that actually does make sense, but none of it makes any sense to me at all. So maybe I can have a simplified version. What would a simplified version look like? A simplified version surely has to be the magic bullet. There has to be a really quick and easy way to create a sustainable business. So I did some research on magic bullets. Everyone's heard of the magic bullet and JFK. It goes around corners, goes between seats, and achieves the impossible. I thought, that's not right. What about a medtech version? Well, the magic bullet, of course, is all about drug delivery to targets, and that's how you achieve the magic. And I thought, well, maybe that's the answer. And then I said, well, you know what? There's some really bad news. And you know what the bad news is? There is no magic bullet. There is no magic formula. But what there is, what the good news is that today my goal is that I can share with you some observations from Trajan and what we've done. And if any of my observations are of any value to you, then I've achieved my goal. Because my goal in being here today is hopefully some of the things we've done might be beneficial to others to learn from. And maybe some of them might work for you, maybe some of them won't. So, the beginning, Trajan, where did it come from? Some of you have heard the story before. One Trajan died in August 117, and he was the 13th emperor of Rome, and he went down in history as being one of the most successful Roman emperors. He led Rome at its peak. He actually had a history or a reputation as doing some good for society. He was a builder of infrastructure and so forth. But the other Trajan started in July 2011. And 2011 was a big year for me personally. I can say it was a big year for Angela too personally. And that was that we reached a milestone in life. And we literally had the kitchen table conversation. And it went like this: do we keep doing what we've been doing before, or do we do something completely different? And Angela's vote was for a European vacation so that we could find ourselves. And I said, no, you only live on this planet once. We've had great careers, we've got a beautiful daughter, we've been able to accumulate a bit of financial security. What's our legacy? What is it that we're going to leave behind when we're gone? And so we decided we would risk everything, because both of us being scientists felt that we could do something that would help science to have an impact on people. And so we decided to roll the dice, risk everything, and start Trajan. And in fact, Trajan was the first thing that we came up with. It wasn't us, it was our daughter. After she got over the panic attack about what does this all mean to her, and was there still going to be a roof over her head, and did it limit her lifestyle in any way, that we were needing a brand. And she loved all things Roman, led by the gladiator, and then from there a little bit of interest in real Roman history. And she said Trajan. And then in there she made me write her a little handwritten note that she still has now, 5 years later, that says that she owns the brand. That she got from her mother, not from me. So very briefly, I don't want this to be about Trajan, but I thought you need to know who we are and what we do. Today, Trajan, 6 acquisitions later, since July 2011, we're a niche company. We provide components, consumables, automation services and medical consulting services in niche areas. And I emphasise the word niche because if you want, formula number 1 or ingredient number 1 of the formula, to me, it's about being niche, particularly in the Australian context. If we look at our most successful medical or scientific businesses, they tend to be world leaders in their space. The Minister mentioned Alex. I've had the pleasure of going down there and seeing that operation. If you think about ResMed or Cochlear and all those sorts of organisations, it's not because they have 5% of a massive market, it's because they're a global leader in a niche market. And what we do at Trajan is I look at the world niche by niche. Where can I go in and dominate a space and become that global leader in that space? Trajan May 2016 today, we're now nearly 400 people. We have operations in Melbourne. We have our own operation now here in Adelaide, which we will expand this year. We've got staff in Sydney. We now have operations in Texas, San Diego, North Carolina, Yokohama, Chester and London. There are a couple of things that we are extraordinarily emotional about. One is that we stick to where it began, and that is ensuring all that we do is about science having an impact on people. But there are 2 other things that I'm very emotional and passionate about as well. One of them is that this current Australian equation. I am really concerned about our prospects as a nation. And I believe that the current conversation about the need to develop a flourishing IP-based industry is more than a conversation, it's an essential. It is absolutely vital to the future prosperity of our nation, and anything I can do to help to make that happen, I'm going to do. And the other thing that's in there is that we also are strongly supportive of developing the careers of women in science. From studies right through to career choices, and any opportunity we have to create opportunities and to support the careers of women in science, that's something that we're also very strongly following. So, sustainability. So please remember that my talk is about sustainability, and there might be some stuff that I say that you don't like. But, if we're going to look for areas of change in our industry, then maybe there's some things that we need to do differently. And to me, there are 3 elements that I can observe about sustainability from my own experience. The first one is you need a foundation. You need a platform upon which you're then going to build a sustainable business. And the elements that go into a foundation might not be what you expect. I think that essential elements are purpose. Why are you doing this? And it can't be because we just want to commercialise some IP. You have to be passionate about it. And I'm going to talk a bit about that because passion is what gives you the fuel, the energy to achieve your purpose. You've got to have a sustainable funding model. And you'll find that, my model is a little bit the reverse of the traditional model. My model is not to raise capital and burn it. Now, I hope there's an exit over there somewhere in case I say the wrong thing. My model from the beginning was, how do we invest in cash-generating businesses that will create our economic platform from which we can then go and achieve our goals? And to me, that was about self-sustainability. Why? Because I didn't want to answer to anybody else. I wanted to have the freedom to be able to execute to our purpose. Number 2 is activity. So when I say activity, I specifically mean value-generating activity. And to me, that's about thinking of what are the core competencies in your team or you as a founder or an entrepreneur. How do you then align the execution or deployment of that core competency to create customer value? And how do you do that and generate revenue and do it with discipline? So having a platform or a foundation and then managing the activities above that. And the third one is then how do you protect yourself from threats? How do you mitigate risk? And to me, when I thought through our history and what is it that perhaps gives us some sustainability, it came down to these three areas. And foundations. Let me start with foundation. This guy here probably knows a little bit about business. And one of his quotes that I found was, to this point, and that is, you've got to have purpose at the core of your operations. When I think about where we started with Trajan, the things that we've been doing are purpose-led. What do I mean by that? So we intentionally started by making a few acquisitions, which meant that we bought going concerns, businesses that were already active, had staff, had production, had facilities and so forth. But then we spoke about the Trajan vision, what our purpose was, why we came to work every day. And for me, even in my position, it was a remarkable thing to observe that because we were led by purpose, people started talking about the purpose and the vision. We were still making the same stuff. We're still selling it to the same customers, but we started to get momentum. We started to build energy around why we were doing what we were doing. We then had purpose in what our activity was all about. This guy, I think, also knew a fair bit about business, and there's a great YouTube video, if you have a chance to see it, where Steve Jobs talks about the essentialness of passion. And the phrase that I like is that if you don't love it, then you're going to fail. That if you do not have a team that is emotionally committed, that is passionate about how you're going to achieve your goals, then you will fail. Because that's what pushes you through the difficult times. That's what allows you to keep people aligned. That if you're doing something with purpose for a reason, then that is the glue that holds people together. The other nice point about this is to understand that passion isn't about being comfortable. It's about being able to push through those areas where there is some discomfort. In the very early stages of Trajan, things did get very, very tough. We had risked everything, and I've said it at home before and made the comment that I haven't had a nervous breakdown in my life. I have pushed myself too far at times and suffered health-wise. But I came as close as it was, I think, in those early days of thinking, oh my God, what have we done? I'm in real trouble here. But what grounded me, what allowed me to keep going on, was that we were committed to this idea, to this vision, that this voyage of Trajan was going to put a new meaning and a new substance behind why we existed on this planet for a short amount of time. And that grounded me back to keep on pushing forward and just absolutely refuse to accept that failure could happen. That whatever obstacle came up, I just pushed through it. At one point, it was getting so difficult that I thought, well, the only way I'm going to get through every day is every day I'm going to run 5 kilometres. So I get up every morning, and if I had to get up at 6, I got up at 6. If I had to get up at 5, I get up at 5. And I started every day running 5Ks. And I thought, if I run 5Ks every day, then the rest of the day, bring it on. And that to me was about how do you access that core that says just push on. And I put it to you that passion is where innovation comes from, not from dollars. Dollars might allow you to pursue your passion and be innovative about doing it, but somebody providing you a suitcase full of dollars doesn't cause innovation. And so when you're thinking about your businesses and your activities, perhaps a question to ask is, what is it that you or your team are willing to risk to achieve your goals? You've all heard, and are there any VCs in the room? No? Okay, good. So you've all heard, what's your skin in the game? What's your investment in the game? And part of that, of course, is about, how committed are you to making this thing work, whatever it might be. So this is our source of passion now. It took us a while to put some words around it, but our passion that we have rallied people around is coming back to our original motivation, and that is, how can science have an impact? Or the way we've phrased it is that we're really about measurement technologies, and how will that enrich the well-being of a growing number of communities. And this is what we use to make decisions every single day. So if we're confronted with two options, and one option is going to have an impact on a new community in some shape or form that will benefit that community, we'll go for that, even if the second option might be more financially attractive. And that gives a lot of certainty in the organisation about who we are and what causes us to make the decisions that we do. Because from purpose comes strategy. If you know what you're doing and why you're doing it, then the strategy follows that purpose. From strategy comes action. And it might seem like the basics, but it's a mantra that I keep driving through our own organisation, because action without strategy is just futile. Some of us, we like to just do stuff. I've got lots of people in my organisation who like to get up and do stuff. And I'll ask them, so why are you doing it? Because the phone rang, because I got this email, because I did this, because I did that. And what I constantly ground them back to is, how does that time, how does that energy align with our strategy? And our strategy is aligned with our purpose. And as I mentioned, it makes decision-making easy. And now, the really rewarding thing I have is that I hear my managers now saying, decision-making is easier, Trajan. Tell us, what are the options? And we always pick the option that serves the purpose. And thus far, that's worked pretty well. I can tell you, though, to get that purpose across to the whole organisation, I spent at least a year repeating it over and over and over again. Another element of foundation. Where do people work? Where do they turn up every day? What is it? What's the environment that they're working in every single day? One of the first things we did when we acquired one of the main facilities that we're in now is that we changed everything. Because where people come to work, where they come to pursue that activity in support of your purpose, needs to reflect what that's all about. So, for example, top left-hand corner there, we knocked down some old meeting rooms and just created open space with whiteboards that you can write on and what I call Google furniture. And what we did was we said to the organisation, don't stay in your office and only bump into each other at the photocopier. You're completely supported in grabbing a coffee, and we put cafe bars there as well. Go and intermingle, go talk, because that's where stuff actually happens. And so we intentionally started to create this different type of activity. The hourglass down there is because every Monday morning we have what we call the Monday morning wrap. It's a stand-up meeting of all the leaders on the site, and people in the organisation see us doing it, so it's a visible activity. Each one of us has 2 minutes to say what happened last week, what's happening next week, how's it aligned with our goals and our direction. Seems like a really simple thing, but it changes the whole feel of the place. It changes the whole, if you like, context of where we are and what it is that we're doing. Top right-hand corner, late last year we opened a new commercial office in the UK. Why? Well, 2% of our business is in Australia. And so I decided to put my commercial team, my marketing team, into the Northern Hemisphere. But part of our strategic plan is that we want to move from servicing laboratories to ultimately servicing the consumer, because we see the personalisation of science is approaching us far more rapidly than what we may realise. And I expect that by the end of this year, we will have products that are available to consumers that are informative, that are empowering, that allow you to have feedback mechanisms about your well-being compared to your nutrition, your exercise regime and so forth. So when I was confronted with, let's put our commercial group into the Northern Hemisphere, we didn't put them into a business park. We didn't put them into a commercial area. We dropped them in a downtown retail area. Every day when they walk to the office, when they go for lunch, they're observing consumers all the time. And it might seem trivial, but it rubs off because they see how retailers are marketing. They see how people are working with their personal devices. They're interacting every day in an environment that is non-corporate. And intentionally, it has no offices. It's got furniture, it's got open workspace and so forth. And the bottom right-hand picture there is Inverlock. And to me, part of a sustainable business is you have to get your senior managers away and out of the business for a couple of days, because it takes one day to flush everything out, and get them to think above the business. And in a sustainable organisation, I think it's absolutely vital that your key people are able to elevate themselves and think above the business, not just in the business. And to me, the thing that works in doing that is get them out of there, get them offside. So, financial foundation. So, please don't chase me out of the room. So sometimes we get these wonderful surveys, right? And the question on the survey is, what is your burn rate? And I fill in the survey and I put a big cross through it because we don't burn. I liken burn rates or burning to the comparison between, say, fossil fuels and renewable energy. What I look for in businesses is how can we become self-sustaining? How can we transition quickly to being a self-sustaining organisation? And understandably, that can raise some really challenging discussions around product, purpose and sustainability. If we look at the Trajan model, what we did was, we had some fossil fuel, which was that we risked everything and took out a heap of personal debt. Really big numbers that would scare anybody. But that's what we did. But then what we did was we said, how do we now embed into the organisation some cash-generating activities to transition us from burning or utilising that debt and starting to fund our own operations? And that's what we did. And that allows us to preserve purpose. And so, to me, enterprise sustainability isn't about how much cash you raise. It's about how you spend it. And I liken it to personal finance. If you look at many of the programs around personal finance, it's more about how you invest your dollars rather than necessarily how many do you earn. It's about outputs more than inputs. So that was the first part, foundation. Second part, activity. And to me, lots of things about activity that fall around things like, what is your core competence? How is it aligned with how you're going to deliver value? That ugly word, revenue, innovation, relationships, and doing things with discipline. And the first question of all is, I think, essential to any organisation, and we did it a lot about 18 months ago at Trajan, and that was to stop and say, what is it that we're really good at? And I think that question needs to be asked lots of times until you get the answer that you know is right. There are lots of easy answers, like we're good at chemistry or we're good at microfabrication. But you've got to go beyond, I think, those immediate answers and ask, what is it that's core that we are really, really good at? Because if you tap into that, then you can align that core competency even down to the individual level and partner to fill what you don't have. I mentioned the word individual level there because another management philosophy that we have adopted is that we no longer try to put square pegs into round holes. That if we've got an organisational chart and we have some great people and there's a void in the chart and we try to put someone into that role and it's not right because either they don't have the attention to detail or because they don't have the right technical depth or there are other reasons why they're not a perfect fit to that role, we don't do it. What we tend to do now is we adopt the model of we've got some great people, what are they really good at and how do we create roles that allow them to operate at maximum effectiveness, maximum output and leveraging their competencies, their core capabilities. To me, one of the tough questions then is how do you make sure that the things you do are because you should do them, not just because you can do them? I find in our organisation and certainly in other organisations I visit, often people do things or companies do things because they can, not necessarily because they should. I've witnessed a number of startups that have self-destructed on this point. There's an example that comes to mind that I use sometimes without giving away names of a company in the UK. So let's call them a platform company. 10, 11 years ago, they invented some remarkable miniaturised technology that would revolutionise this particular area of instrumentation. They had invented it. They had done the prototypes. They spent the last 10 years designing boxes, software, power supplies, hired 30 engineers that are doing the mechanical designs and so forth, and that incredible initial IP that was the starting point of the business is still sitting there. And that is one of the examples that I see sometimes, is that there is a core to the business, a high value component that causes people to get started, and then the activities start to grow and multiply, and the funding starts to get spent in the areas that are not about that core, about all the things they imagine they have to do in order to commercialise, monetise that core. And I think there are a lot of organisations, if we went in and applied that principle, we could unlock their potential, unlock their ability to become truly commercial far quicker. What's our core competency? Our core competency is organisational. And it took us a while to get to this point, but it is about collaboration. Because thus far we've been lucky enough to remain our own masters, we can make up our own rules. And we're global, we're highly vertical, and what that means is whether it's the University of Adelaide, whether it's an organic synthesis company in Melbourne, whether it's a department of a university in South Carolina, we are able to collaborate because we can work with different organisations in different ways and abide by what they need to happen in order to create a successful collaboration. And so that's really appealing to us because with our goal being around having an impact, collaboration means that I can amplify our impact 100-fold. And that model now is truly playing out. We have collaborations right across the country now with a number of universities, a number of other organisations, and indeed even with commercial outlets around the world. It's all about our collaborative model. How do you align activity with purpose? There are 4 really easy questions that I like to use a lot. This guy used to ask them a lot, and that is you question everything. And the first one is, when there's activity, why are we doing it? The second question is, what is it that we're doing? You probably guessed the third question is, how is it that we're actually doing it? And the fourth one is, what if? And you may or may not know, but it tends to be the case that most people think in 2 of these quadrants and not in the other 2. I think all the time in why and what if. So it's about the purpose or the reason, the motivation for doing something, and then I think about what if we did something else. So that tends to be a creative way of looking at the world. I am lousy at how you do it or what it is specifically that we're going to do. And so I find it's necessary to surround myself with people, and there'll be heads nodding over there somewhere and laughter over there, that clean up the detail afterwards. But I have to recognise that in myself, and you might find in your own organisations, if you think about these 4 quadrants and these 4 questions, that you will probably find that you yourself think naturally in 2 of them and not so well in the others. And I constantly now think about this in terms of making sure that people are able to connect, which again goes back to having a sustainable organisation. Activity with customer intimacy. One of the models that we use is Geoffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm. I had the pleasure of doing some workshops with Geoffrey Moore when he first published back in the early 1990s. And the thing I love about his value proposition format is you have to be really specific. You can't talk about the food market or the stem cell market or this market. You have to talk specifics to the point where if you're talking about a customer for whom they should value or appreciate your value proposition, the detail is at the level where you could pick up the phone book and call that person because you're specifically talking about a certain role in a certain customer organisation. And I find that having to get down to the specifics is really confronting, but it fleshes out where the value resides. And we use this in our planning. So as we're bringing technologies to market, as we're thinking through what is the value proposition, we push this around really hard about who. Who specifically are you talking about and why do they care about what you're doing? I hope you like this dessert on the left-hand side. This was a dessert that I had in Singapore last year. If I went to this restaurant and I had banana fritter and cheesecake, it'd be no big deal. But the Lego blocks were cheesecake and the dust was chocolate spreckles and the ice cream was this buttermilk ice cream. And I still remember that dessert now, but it's not about the ingredients. It was about the experience. And to me, that speaks a lot that we often, from a technology platform point of view, we think about the data, we think about the technology behind the product, but the more time we're thinking about how will our customer experience it, what is it like to interface with that product, the more value that we can add. I still remember that dessert now, and I can tell you I can't remember many other desserts I've had since then, and it was because of the experience, the impression that it created in the process. Revenue. One model we use at Trajan in terms of deriving new revenue streams is this one. And what it basically says is everything you do is based on some sort of capability, top of the chart. Second is that you create from that capability some product or service, typically. That product or service has some pathway to market. That pathway to market services some application. A model that we use is we look at any existing revenue stream and we ask the question, can we change just one of those and create another revenue stream? So for example, if we have a certain capability and we have a product that's going to market in a certain way, is there another product or service that we can generate from that capability, which may service the same pathway to market and the same application, but in a different shape or form? Or can we take the original product, the original capability, and get it to market through another pathway? With some of the commodity businesses that we acquired, that's exactly what we did and how we became global leaders in niches. We looked at the same capability, the same type of product, but what are all the different ways it could go to market? It could go under this brand, it could go through this outlet, it could go into these kits, it could go into these other ways of getting into a laboratory. And so we keep working this model over and over, if you like, to extract the maximum revenue out of any source of IP. We run an accelerator model at Trajan now, and I'll talk a bit about that in a moment. But one of the things we ask when we do the accelerator model is the business defined by a product or is it defined by the person? And it's a vital question, I think, because if a business is defined by a product, then in the good old technology adoption life cycle, that product resides at a certain point. And therefore, the point of the organisation becomes defined by that product. If the organisation, if the enterprise is about people, and the people happen to have started their business with a certain product, then the definition of the business is a level above that. And that then gives you the freedom to consider what are the full scope of potential opportunities? What are the full breadth of market segments that we could address? And again, it's another model that we use very often, most importantly, to make sure we get the language right. That if we're selling to conservatives, then we need to do our value proposition using conservative language. If we're talking to early adopters, visionaries, then we need to use language that they will relate to. So we change our model depending on what it is that we're doing and where it's being delivered. Oh, welcome to the ideas boom. There's never been a better, more exciting time to be in innovation. So, innovation, yep, good. One of the things that I would say is you've got to be innovative about innovation. Sometimes us as technical people, we keep thinking that it has to be highly technical to be innovative. It doesn't necessarily have to be. It just has to be different. So my definition, my short-term definition of innovation is just do anything that's different, that adds value to your customer. And that might just be packaging. It might be the way it's delivered. It might be the way it's positioned. It doesn't always have to be an extraordinarily different technical platform to be innovative or to be different. Leverage relationships, yeah, so we have intentionally raised our profile, and why would we do that? Because our purpose is to have impact. How do you have impact? Raise your profile. And so that's why we've been doing that, to see how is it that we can raise our profile and therefore be more engaged across the board in areas that are going to serve our purpose about impacting human well-being. This is a little Trajan secret, I guess. When we're involved in sales, we have a model that we use, which we refer to as a tactical checklist, that allows us to manage the sales process. And the reason I put it up there is because, again, it's about helping our people be above process rather than being buried in process. To understand what are the steps that you go through in order to close an opportunity, to bring revenue onto the table. And so this is a tool that we all use every day. We have a global system where we can all look on every project that is underway worldwide and exactly where that particular account owner is at in working this process. Mitigating risks. Really important thing about risks is not Copenhagen, but the weather outside. And so it's important to understand the macro environment in which you intend to exist. And this is the way I think about macro environment in the Trajan world. And you've probably seen that graphic before. I love it. You are here. It sort of makes us all feel a bit sort of irrelevant, doesn't it? So the macro environment for Trajan, what's going on in the world? We look at it and we say, okay, technology is being personalised. There's this incredible talent and infrastructure in the academic sector. There's a global market that's looking for more and more specialised partners, and so on and so on. One big one in there, if we're talking about the sustainability of an Australian-based business, is the currency. I went to an event hosted by the National Australia Bank about 4 years ago, and they put up a remarkable chart that said, for the 5 years previous, 20 economists, there's no economists in the room, good? 20 economists, their prediction of the band of where the Australian dollar would be at the end of the year. Every year for 5 years. At the end of the 5-year period, not one was right in any year. Right? The Australian dollar is the 4th or 5th most traded currency in the world, and we're the 19th or 20th economy in the world. You know, the Australian dollar is a speculative currency. And so one of the big risks you've got in trying to create a sustainable business based in Australia is how do you deal with the currency? So there's two things that we do. One is that we forward hedge. But you know, you need to have some predictability about your revenue if you're going to be able to forward hedge. And that's why it's always a good sustainable attribute to have some base of recurring revenue that you can hedge against. The second thing we try to do is start to diversify our cost mix. 2 of our acquisitions this year, have been in the US. Why? Because 65% of our revenue is in US dollars. And at the moment, about 5% of our costs are in US dollars. And so we're exposed. And what we do is we hedge as far as we can, and I'm slowly shifting the mix of our costs to match the mix of our income. How many people have read Jim Collins? No one? One? Yay! 1, 2, 2, 3. All right, good. Jim Collins, his philosophy, it's all about people. So, first book around From Good to Great, and this one, which I think is even better, Great by Choice. This, for me, has embedded in it the best risk mitigation model that I have seen, which is fire bullets and then fire cannons. What that means is launch in parallel at low cost activities and wait to see which activity resonates before you invest the big bucks. Often we see organisations that have an idea, raise the fund and invest the big bucks all in one shot. What Collins says is don't do that. Fire parallel bullets that are low risk, low cost, and see what you hear. And when you get the feedback that one of those bullets is on the money, then load up and fire again. We use this now all the time. And one of the things that our organisation had to get used to was failure. Because if you fire 20 bullets, expect 15 of them are going to fail. But the 5 that don't are the ones that you load up on. So here's an example of Trajan and product development and firing bullets. You may or may not have seen that we are launching a blood microsampling device. But how did that start? We didn't start by saying, let's put together a heap of capital and go into blood microsampling. We started by saying our passion, our purpose is about science that benefits people. We then looked at the macro environment and said, the world is becoming decentralised, it's becoming personalised, there's rising healthcare costs. This is what's going on in the environment. We then saw that we have competency in these sorts of areas, okay, so that's our core competency in this environment. And if we take all those things into consideration, therefore it leads to the idea that if you're going to go down the path of personalisation, decentralisation, you've got to take some form of sampling to the person instead of the person presenting to be sampled, if that makes sense. We started by not knowing what is it that we would sample. So we went out there and said, tell us about saliva, tell us about teardrops, tell us about skin, tell us about blood, tell us about hair, tell us about... We knew that a lot of those probably weren't going to be the right thing, but we went down each of those paths and explored them. And what we heard coming back was that blood is information rich. And then we said, so why isn't blood being sampled remotely? Because, you know, DBS has been around for a long, long time. Why hasn't it been spread further? And we got the feedback about it being not quantitative, about the hematocrit effect, about cross-contamination or contamination itself. So we said, so what if we fixed all of those problems with a design that looked like this? And then what we did was we fired bullets again. So we went back on the road, went around the world, we went to pharmaceutical companies, people who'd run clinical trials, near patient care providers, and we said, what if you had this? What if you had this? And we got the feedback again. And what that resulted in was, yeah, but you need to change it. You need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do something else. And we did all those things. And so now we're firing the cannon, and now we're building up large-scale manufacture. And I'm hoping at some point in the near future we will actually end up doing that. Marco, you'll be happy. End up doing that somewhere not too far from here. So another example was our university collaborations, that we now have great collaborations with the University of South Australia, University of Adelaide, University of Tasmania, Monash University, to name a few, and we're working on some stuff with Melbourne University. But we visited at least 15 universities. We fired lots of bullets, spent lots of time, and in the end ended up working with those that fitted our criteria, that we could work together. And again, it meant that there was lots of failures, if you like, along the way, but where we heard the resonating sound of a bullet hitting, that's where we said, let's invest more, let's develop the relationship further. Same thing happened in our M&A program. So we went down the path of saying we need to make acquisitions to grow at the rate that we want to grow and have impact. And as we tried to do that, we kept seeing what worked and what didn't work, and then ultimately we ended up creating our own accelerator program, which is quite different to anything else that I've seen, but it again was a result of having lots of failures over 18 months and asking ourselves, why didn't it work? What was wrong with it? What was it that was confronting for the founder or the entrepreneur as we were looking at investing in their business? And that again came about by going through that process of firing bullets. And near the end here, another process that I love using is what I call the let's go to the moon theory. And what that is about is if you've seen that speech by JFK when he says we're going to go to the moon by the end of the 1960s, he intentionally was giving people a goal that could not be achieved by incremental process. In other words, if you set a goal and there is no way of achieving that goal by doing more or just varying what you do today, it creates discontinuous innovation. And we've done the same at Trajan. We've painted a picture of who we will be in 2020. We did that in February last year, and there's no way we can be that by just doing more of what we were doing last year. And that's causing people to think completely differently about how we will develop our business over these, well, we've only got 4 years left now, over this time period. There's a great book, I don't know how many people may have read it in the room, which is called How Google Works. And my biggest takeaway from that book was you have to repeat things 20 times before it sinks in. In February last year, when we defined what we thought our vision was about, I told everyone. And you would think they've been told, they know what it is. So I go back maybe a month later, visit the office in the UK and have everyone in the room. And I'd say, what's our vision? Yeah, the phone would ring. That's call a friend over there. And no one would know. And what I learnt was you have to repeat it over and over and over again. And we did that over and over again. And now every time I walk into a room, and I try to meet regularly with all people worldwide, before I even ask the question, I go, the vision is... So it is now really sunk in. But that is about taking people along on the journey with you. So in summary, it's about foundation, it's about activity, and it's about mitigating risk. And I've mentioned a few books. I put them up here. Why do I put them up there? Because if you go to our dining room table, much to Angela's frustration, you'll see these books strewn all over the table, and there is pages that are written all over and they're highlighted. Why? Because they're the 4 I keep coming back to that teach me stuff, that re-ground me, recalibrate me in the things that we're doing inside of Trajan. And I find each of them has really good content. And I've had the pleasure of meeting some of those authors. If you have a chance, if you have not read Blue Ocean Strategy, please do, because to me that's the most powerful book there in terms of developing disruptive strategies to cause successful growth. That's it. I hope that was of some value to you in the room here today.